3, 2, 1, 0. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Welcome back to Rogue Creators, presented by Go Rogue X. My name is Brian Fitton.
And I'm Lauren Lewis.
And this is the podcast dedicated to marketers and creators who are wanting to serve first and stand out from the crowd. Make sure that you subscribe every single week, YouTube, as well as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, to get all of the tools and resources you need to be the go-to name in your industry. Let's go. Hey everyone, welcome back to Rogue Creators, the podcast dedicated to doing things differently. It is presented by Go Rogue X. We enjoy kind of standing out from the crowd, creating content that is different, that's engaging, that's helpful and educational. Make sure that you guys go every single week. We try to provide all this value, so make sure you subscribe. This is also a video podcast. We love video podcasts,
Absolutely.
Right, Lauren? It's my co-host Lauren. We're videoing this as well, so make sure you guys jump on YouTube and subscribe over there if you want to watch. But also everything is available at goroguex.com/podcast. So we like to bring on interesting people who are doing really cool things in the marketing space specifically to help you out. And one of our favorite topics, I say the favorite, we've kind of just gotten into this B2B world, has been there's so many layers to that level of selling and engaging a buyer in that world. And so we brought on Wendy Covey from True Marketing. Wendy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Awesome. We are so excited to have you on the show today. We are going to jump into all things content marketing and specifically, in that kind of technical space, because we do have some clients who are in that world as well. And so it's so much fun to kind of dive into a lot of those topics that don't get talked about a lot, but you have an amazing podcast where you are just bringing tons of value to that community. And so we want to talk a little bit about that. But before we do, we like to have a lot of fun at the beginning of our episode, right, Lauren?
Yes, we do. Each episode, we like to start off with, what are you obsessed with? So starting with our wonderful guest, Wendy, what are you obsessed with this week?
This week, well, I'll put a little plug in for my fishing record.
Ooh.
Oh, okay.
So I have a state record for catching the largest redfish in the state of Texas.
Whoa.
So this week, I'm obsessed with researching buying a fishing boat because I am itching to get on the water when it gets a little warmer. And so my fishing pole is calling my name.
That's incredible.
That's super impressive.
Yeah, that's and you're based in Austin, Texas, correct?
I am. So it's a little bit of a drive to the Texas coast. So we usually go in the Corpus Christi, Baffin Bay area.
Okay.
So
Yeah, that's incredible. We're Northwest Arkansas based, so there's lakes everywhere, so there's always fishing going on. I am not a fisherman, but I'm very intrigued.
I thought you were going to say that you were a fisherman.
I'm a jack of all trades. I mean, I have fished before, but that's another level, Wendy, of fishing.
Yeah.
So that's awesome. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of a joke around the house because, my husband used to brag about the biggest catch and then hear his wife, who I hadn't been fishing all that long when it happened, when I got this record. It's been almost a decade, but I've been hooked, so to speak, ever since. So
That's
Awesome.
incredible. That's incredible. All right. What about you, Lauren? What are you obsessed with this week?
I had it in my head, and then all of a sudden it disappeared. So Brian, what are you obsessed with this week? And you can come back to me in just a second.
So I don't get a ton of time to watch TV or anything, but this week I have been rolling through the rockumentaries. I've talked about this before, but there's one so I got a free trial of Apple TV Plus, and so the Beastie Boys documentary is on there. I have always loved the Beastie Boys, but they're always like that band's like, oh yeah, I'd love to listen to a song, and your 5 Beastie Boys songs or whatever, but it was very interesting to like dive into just the band. And I mean, even like they're older now and they are just still kind of crazy, which I appreciate. It wasn't just a facade or something that they did. It was actually like who they were. And so, but just to hear even like the story of MCA, who died from cancer, I think back in 2012, and just how influential he was, and just hip hop and all of that whole world is very interesting. So this was I've been like on my deep dive into Def Jam and almost bought a Def Jam hoodie, and there's I go down that I go hardcore if I can, but yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Anyway, Lauren, did you remember yours?
I did. Right as you started talking, I was like, oh, there it is. So I mean, one thing I'm currently selling my house, and so that's why my brain is a little bit foggy. But so my husband and I started Money Heist. So Ava, our content coordinator, she's smiling at me now, raved about it. And I had really not started it just simply because sometimes it's hard for me to get past the fact that it's dubbed because it's in Spanish. And so I didn't know if I could get over it. And I have been able to get over it. And we've watched 2 episodes so far, and it's actually really interesting. I don't like heist stuff, but I actually...
That's crazy.
It just bores me. But this one's actually pretty interesting. I'm giving it a go, and I think it's good. Yeah, because we were in a bit of a show hole, and so now we're giving this one a go, and I think it's pretty good.
Nice, good. We usually do not agree on TV shows at all, for the most part, like Bridgerton or whatever it is.
Whatever would you watch that? Though?
Whatever the baking show is, I do.
You're
try.
just crazy on the baking show.
I try. I know my wife and I though we try to I'm like Lauren says this is what we need, so we try to. It's just not there. So we're gonna start Cobra Kai though.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, we need to move on. So sorry, Wendy.
Well, I'm sure your wife is lining up for that.
Yeah. All right, so let's dive into Wendy and what you guys do at True Marketing, and what all the things. And so tell us just a little bit about you, background, obviously, and about your business too.
Sure. So I guess I'll start with me. So I've been in marketing for over 20 years now, and I started as a baby marketer at a company called National Instruments. They're a pretty large, sizable business these days, over $1 billion. So that's where I cut my teeth, and I was there for 12 years. And then a colleague, a friend of mine, and I decided to start a marketing agency, and that was what is now True Marketing. And that was another 12 years ago. And when we first started the business, we were focused on being an integrated marketing firm, and we'd work with anybody who would hire us, right? This scrappy new business, like, come on, just please pay us. We know some stuff. And that went on for the first year. And then the Great Recession occurred, which is, it's kind of funny to think about Great Recession, right? As we're still in our pandemic days here. But it was really quite a time to have started a new business. So we panicked a bit, and then we calmed down and we said, okay, where are we going? What do we know? And both of us had spent our whole careers marketing to engineers and technical audiences. We knew the trade shows, the publications, we knew how to write for this audience. And so we decided to narrow our focus to only work with technical audiences. And once we proclaimed that, our business took off. And we had this saying, you need to say no in order to grow. And it worked really well for us. We actually were recognized by the Wall Street Journal as entrepreneurs, top entrepreneurs in the world. And
That's
this
incredible.
Was really just for saying no to grow. It was a simple concept, but it's sometimes companies have a hard time having the discipline to stick to it. And anyway, we've done it. We've been here, and now we're 12 years later, still going strong.
Love that. That's incredible too, because a lot of times when you think of marketing in general, you think of that B2C space, right? So it's mainly about consumers, and that's where you go. But this whole industry is not getting the attention or appreciation or love or any of that because nobody's really focusing on it. So it's incredible to see what you guys are doing as well. And just we talked before about your website, we're big video people around here, obviously, and having a great video right up front to talk about who you guys are and what you do and the problem that you're solving is just incredible. And so that was one of the reasons we were talking too of having you on our show, because that B2B space doesn't get a lot of love, and so it's interesting to find people who are doing it right in that industry. So that's awesome.
Thank you. And the concept of content marketing and video as a form of content it's so important for an engineering audience that needs lots of data and information to make critical decisions, purchase decisions that literally could affect life and death. And so we just love that content marketing is such an effective tool that fits so nicely within this niche.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So when we love to talk about content and different forms of content and how best to use it. And when you get into that space, I think it's important to talk about quality content and what's shareable content, because there's so much that can be produced that's kind of a waste of time. So in your mind, what makes good shareable content?
Yeah, great question. And I'll have companies that'll call us and they're in dire straits because they've hired a writer that doesn't understand their company to come write content for them. And when it comes to a technical company, you have all these acronyms and very technical applications that they're working on, and it's difficult to write about that in a way that's accurate. So when you think about quality content, first it needs to be accurate, right? And you need to use acronyms appropriately and communicate things that are have the right specs in them. And so that's kind of like, I guess, your table stake. And then secondly, I think a lot of technical companies make the mistake of talking about their products. So the specs and the features of their products, and they don't start with what is the problem we're trying to solve.
Yep.
What getting into the customer's mindset of, what are they challenged with? Why are they seeking this product? What will it help them accomplish?
Yeah.
And so if you're speaking to the prospect, to their needs in a way that's accurate, you're most of the way there. So those are the two biggest things. And then I think the third one is just figuring out what form factor works best for your content. So is this more suitable as a case study or a white paper or video or a blog post, or maybe all of that? So having a plan for, where is this along the buyer's journey? How should this content be consumed? How do I package this? And then how do I repurpose it so that people can find it in the way that they want to consume it?
Absolutely. Oh, I love that. You hit on something too that friend of the show, Pat Flynn.
Oh my
No
gosh.
big deal. Remember Pat Flynn back in the day. He's always hit on something of being able to explain the problem better than your customer. And so you hit on that. It has to be accurate, but you also have to be able to present the problem rather than just going right into the solution. Being able to say, hey, we understand this problem. Let me tell you how much we actually understand this problem, and go through all the steps and be able to really give them a voice that they probably didn't even know. They didn't even know that they could explain that problem so well. And so that a lot of times will help you in the sales process, because they will obviously know, hey, they know what we're going through and have that empathy. And so I think you hit on that. That's near and dear to my heart. Obviously, that's good. Sorry, I get passionate about this.
So what areas of content marketing do you feel that a lot of businesses ignore that they totally shouldn't?
Well, there's a reason why Brian was also featured on my podcast recently, is because video is one of the top ones. I think it's an intimidating, or at least is construed to be intimidating, complicated, and people are really missing the boat by not leaning into video. I was sharing with Brian that 96% of engineers watch video for work every single week.
Wow.
96%. And when you look at companies that serve this audience, I guarantee you it's not 96% of companies that have video.
Yeah.
And so there's this misperception that the video that they create has to be top quality, and they just don't recognize that authenticity is important, giving a face to your brand is important, and there's all different ways you can package video within your content. So in 2021, we're trying to help companies overcome this fear and figure out a video model that works for them and starts with where they are, because we know the engineers love this type of content.
Yeah, and in one of your, actually, I think it's the opening video that you guys have on your website. It talks about, I think, 16 pieces of content that your buyers consume before they make a purchasing decision, and that's something we've talked about on the show. It's a long process, so there is a lot of showing up in the feed, being front of mind for them. They're seeing you on LinkedIn, or they're seeing you in the Google results, constantly showing up, and you're providing that value. Obviously, video being a big piece of that, but love that statistic too, because we're all human. Like we don't ever talk about this to where it's like, when you need to problem solve, where do you go? And most people just go to YouTube, right? And so they're already there. And so why in the world would your buyer be different than what you do, right? And so a lot of times we don't think in that human aspect. It's like, well, it has to be here if it's business. It has to just be on LinkedIn, or just has to be here. Like, you don't consume content like that. And so I love that you guys are kind of expanding that, trying different things. And yes, I enjoy being on your podcast as well. That was a real treat, and I'm very honored. And it was a lot of fun to talk and kind of dive into the technical aspect of video and repurposing that content too. So.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting too is if you look at the engineer's buyer's journey, more and more is conducted online than ever before. So in our research that we conduct annually, we ask a question about how much time do you spend researching online before you want to talk to a salesperson? And I think it's like 62% of the buyer's journey is complete before they want to pick up that phone. And the younger engineers and technical specifiers want even more research to be done online. They're like over 70%. Wow. So that's why this 16 pieces of content is so important. They're looking to go through a good portion of that buyer's journey on your website through being helped by this content, through researching. And, some of it is how-to information. Some of it's deep technical specifications, perhaps about a product. It just depends on what somebody's offering up. One of the other popular things are CAD drawings. That's one of the top things that engineers are willing to fill out a form for. So lots of nuances when it comes to this audience. But one thing's for sure, they're conducting a lot of what they do on a vendor's website.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. So you've kind of hit on this a little bit, but written content can often be seen nowadays as not as like sexy and exciting. But tell us why you think it should still definitely have a place at the table.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So when we look at the data of which content pieces are most consumed, it still goes back to white papers, case studies, long form web pages, FAQs. These are all incredibly popular pieces. So it's an and, not an or. And I know that means the bigger investment in content, and that can be difficult for technical marketers because this content is not easy to put together. Yeah. But it's important. It's valued by engineers. It makes the difference in the buyer's journey. And so really it comes down to thinking about repurposing and having your prospect top of mind when you build your content strategy so that you can come with a plan that works, but is also efficient for you as a marketer to implement.
Absolutely. Talk through a little bit of that plan. So when you're coming in, you're creating content, you're going through this. Obviously, we have a repurposing process that we go through of taking, that one video, and then we go through and chop it up and put it in different places. But from your aspect, you guys are obviously, this is way more technical. What does that process kind of look like? Just an overview.
Yeah, so it starts with understanding who your buyer personas are. So, is it the engineer specifier? Is it a vice president of manufacturing? Someone in design engineering, procurement? So who are you looking to attract? And then what does their buyer's journey look like? And so you have to ask what are their pain points? Why are they seeking your solutions? And then how do I send them down this path? And so we do this often utilizing a tool called topic clustering. So think of a mind map, essentially, if you've ever used that in brainstorming. So you have your central theme and then all the different topics that you could create content around. And so, for example, one of our clients is big into cybersecurity for the manufacturing plant. And, gosh, if you think about it, wow, someone could hack into your IoT devices and do great damage to your manufacturing line. It's a huge, scary thing.
Yeah.
And so imagine if that's your central theme, all of the topics that you can write about related to pain points as well as solutions. And then from there, we talk about, okay, what content do you already have? What needs to be created? What form factor should that piece of content be in? Should it be gated or not? And then once you have that content planned together, kind of like an editorial calendar, then we talk about what are the ways to promote this content? What are the ways to repurpose this? And so we just want to make sure that we're serving the persona's needs first before we get into what a lot of companies want to jump through first, which is how do we, increase search, or how do we utilize social channels better? We're like, no, you're not ready for that yet.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your buyer first.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I love that, just that strategy in general, because a lot of times it is saying, pump the brakes. Like, let's get the foundations laid first before we do all the really the fun and creative stuff. And that's usually me. I'm usually the one saying, "Hey, let's get to the fun stuff. Like, let's do that right now."
I thought you were saying I'm the fun and creative one. I'm like, oh, okay. Kick me the curb here.
It's fun. It's still fun doing this
It
strategy.
is. Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
One of the things we'll uncover too is companies will feel like they have a differentiated position in the market with how they're messaging themselves. And sometimes during this process, we'll have to put up a mirror to them to show them, sorry, no. But let's fix that.
Yeah.
And often that involves talking to their customers and interviewing them on why they chose their company or solution and what makes them different, and hearing the voice of the customer and bringing that into the content as it's being created. And that's a very powerful tool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Love that.
Well, we've talked a little bit about, video is super important, but are there any other social trends that you're predicting for 2021?
Yeah, so social is really interesting when it comes to the technical buyer. They do not like Twitter very much, or most of the other what I would consider more B2C oriented platform.
Yeah.
So when it comes to social, LinkedIn is big, but also community networks. And so I feel like sometimes these are overlooked by marketers because we think of, the major social platforms, but think of things like Stack Overflow, or a technical or professional association that has a social networking site where you can post back and forth, you can chat, you can, find people, even directory listings is a part of that. Those tend to be the places where the technical buyer goes first. And so I'm not saying there's not a place for Facebook, for Twitter, for other platforms. I'm just saying that when a marketer has limited time and budget, to bias towards those professional networks and LinkedIn first.
Yeah. Oh, that's something that we need to dive into that. I love that. I love that. Especially coming from the corporate world, there were a lot of internal communications, that content you could actually put out there, and you're connecting with people, and hey, this is something I wrote, and that is not utilized a lot, especially when you think of creating content. You just think of outward facing, right? We used to do a lot of even internal. I was producing a podcast for the company, but we used Instagram to kind of engage employees to then go and listen to that, which was all internal. And so there's a lot of ways to really, I love that. That's something we haven't really talked about or hit on, but so one of our clients has an internal, they're a part of an organization, and he shares his podcast within that application. It's a whole forum that they have set up. He's found guests in that, worked with people through that, and I think it's great, because that's something that gets overlooked a lot of times. And I'm kind of blown away with the Twitter thing. I didn't know the engineering world didn't like Twitter. That's interesting. That's interesting.
Oh,
at least on a business
side. You'll have to go download the research report and see the stats, but
absolutely,
it's abysmal. It really is.
Wow.
So tell us, what is next for True Marketing?
Well, each year we have a theme, and so it affects how we operate and what we're doing. And so last year it was lead by example. And so we were doing a lot of things with our own agency, like publishing a book, starting a podcast, starting online training, and doing things that a lot of our clients are thinking of doing, thinking of stepping into. And so we always want to try things out first on ourselves, and take the airs in the back, so to speak, before we start something with our clients. And so in 2021, we're really focused on client success and retention. And not that we aren't always focused on that, but we're looking for ways, in particular for our longer standing clients, to start experimenting more with video, with podcasts, with CAD drawings, with other ways besides the typical, let's make sure your website's performing well, that you're blogging often, that you have your white papers, you know, the typical things that are producing success. We're trying to get more innovative with them, look at interactive digital assets on their sites. So starting to push the envelope ahead of their competition now that they have the basics down and are have healthy pipelines of leads coming in.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. That's great. Yeah. And so, I mean, you guys are obviously moving the right direction. You've had some great guests on your show as well. And I've enjoyed listening to your podcast. James Mulvaney, I'll give a shout out. We talked about that on your show, but oh yeah, you've had some great guests as well as myself. Make sure that you guys go check out my episode with Wendy. Where can they find more information about your podcast specifically and book?
Yeah, so if you visit True Marketing, and that's TREW marketing.com, and then /podcast, you'll find the podcast. And if you go to our resources center, you'll find a ton of ebooks, our new research report, and also a link to my book called Content Marketing Engineered. So go check it out. It's a great guide to reaching technical audiences through content marketing.
Ah, love that.
Great.
Love that. Wendy, this has been fantastic. Any final words of advice for those out there who are laying the foundations? You know, they're in that kind of technical space. Any advice for them for starting up their content marketing strategies?
Yeah, I'd say if you're just getting started, then start with one persona. Start with one buyer in mind and think about all the different things that you can write about that help them solve their problems and their challenges. And if you can resonate with that buyer, you'll gain traction and with search with that buyer and convert leads for sales. So just don't be overwhelmed. Start there and then expand out as you go.
Oh, that's great advice. Great advice.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much, Wendy, for jumping on the show today. We appreciate it. We'll have all of everything that Wendy talked about in our blog and show notes and links back to her as well. But make sure you go check out her podcast and all the awesome things that True Marketing that they're doing over there. And until next week, we'll see you guys later. Thanks.